The Holy Gospel according to St. John, the 13th chapter. Glory to you, O Lord. When Judas had gone out, Jesus said, "Now the Son of Man has been glorified, and God has been glorified in him. If God has been glorified in him, God will also glorify him in himself, and will glorify him at once. Little children, I am with you only a little longer. You will look for me, and as I said to the Jews, so now I say to you, where I am going you cannot come. I give you a new commandment, that you love one another. Just as I have loved you, you also should love one another. By this, everyone will know that you are my disciples, if you have love for one another." The Gospel of the Lord. So in today's Gospel reading, Jesus does tell his disciples, "I give you this new commandment, that you love one another. Just as I have loved you, you also should love one another." And then he goes on, and he says, in fact, by this, everyone will know that you are my disciples if you have love for one another. This is not just one of many things that Jesus tells his disciples. It's Jesus' parting instruction. He said this just before he was heading to his death, and he knew it. And if you're about to die, and you have one thing that you want your friends to really, really remember, you choose your words really carefully. Jesus could have said a lot of other things. He could have said, "Everybody will know you are my disciples if you have the most correct and perfect theology." And everybody says, "Wow, what profound ideas you have about God." Or he could have said, "Everybody will know that you are my disciples because you are the most morally righteous people around." And everybody goes, "Oh, what good and wonderful people you are." Or he could have said, "Everyone will know that you are my disciples because you are the most successful and popular group in town and everybody wants to join your group." But Jesus didn't say any of those things. And it's not as though Jesus was endorsing bad theology or immoral behavior or making a virtue out of failure. But in the end, Jesus was saying that if we want to be people who are identified by the world as disciples of Jesus, we need to be people who in our words and deeds and attitudes reflect God's self-giving love. That's what God was doing in Jesus when Jesus died for us. That's why Jesus says that we should also love one another as he loved us. And that's why if we don't reflect that kind of love, none of our theology, our morality, or our success is going to matter. But it is not as easy as it sounds. Jesus doesn't say, "Love people who love you back," or "Love people who deserve your love." He simply says, "Love one another." That is, even the people you don't get along with, even the people you don't know, even the people you do not like. But I listen to these words, and sometimes I want to say to Jesus, "Okay, so how am I supposed to do that?" I mean, really, some of these folks you seem to want me to generate warm, fuzzy feelings for are people I do not even like. And how can I really love somebody that I don't know? But see, in fact, Jesus isn't talking or asking us to generate or pretend to have warm, fuzzy feelings for one another. The word that Jesus almost always uses, the Greek word agape. And agape is not a word that means having feelings deep in your heart. It's an active thing. It's about how one cares actively for somebody else, how one gives of oneself to help somebody in deep need. It's the kind of love that a parent has for a child who would do anything for that child. So Jesus is calling us to love one another with the kind of love that Jesus, in fact, has shown for us in dying for us. And that kind of love is about focusing on others instead of on ourselves. From the beginning of the gospel stories, Jesus shows God's love by being willing to focus on the needs of others instead of his own needs. He doesn't just do it for his friends or the people who love him back. He does it because others need his focus, even strangers, even the people who are trying to kill him. And this, is the reason that we had the auction and why we have thought about things that people really need when we're getting ready for our yard sale. I mean, it's about looking around and saying, you know what, people are in deep need right now. And our folks on Social Justice Ministry Committee said, you know what, there's all these refugees that are coming to our country. They need help. We need to do something. They need this. And that's what love, Jesus' kind of love, is about. It's about looking at the needs of folks and saying, what can we do to address the actual needs? We do this in our yard sale too, because as we've thought about how we're going to tweak the yard sale a little bit and refocus some of the things that we do, we know that every year, even though people come here and they like to, they sort through the tchotchke that we've got and all these kind of goofy, stupid little things, there are other people who walk up to us and hug us and say, you know what, I couldn't actually clothe my kids if you didn't have the children's clothing department here. I couldn't afford to buy toys for my kids if you didn't have this here. I couldn't, buy a bed that I need in my house unless I could buy it for $10 here or something like that. We know there are people who deeply need things, and we want to make sure that as we do yard sale, we make sure that we have the things that people in our community actually need. Because the kind of love that Jesus calls us to have is focused not on the needs for us to make money or be successful. It's about what do people actually need in our community, and how can we help them with those needs. The love that Jesus is calling us to have is also about having empathy for others, but not necessarily warm, fuzzy feelings. Empathy is about being able to say, all right, I care about your needs, rather than necessarily like, oh, I love you so much. You're such a nice person, Jesus demonstrates this by washing his disciples' feet, which he does just before this reading. And again, he does that not because he likes dirty work, but because in that culture, feet needed to be washed. He cared about what others needed, even Judas, who's still around in the room, who betrayed him. Now, most of us, we are not personally going to know any of refugees who our auction is going to benefit. And we don't know, even if we work the yard sale, we don't know a lot of the people who come here and buy our stuff. And, if you do get to know some of those people, there are times, like I get up here and I tell the story about how people come up and they hug us because we're helping them clothe their kids. I usually do not tell the stories about out here where we have the bikes and people getting into fist fights about who gets to buy the bike. I mean, some of these people that come here that really need this help, they are not the most lovable people. We're not called to love them and help them because they're the most lovable people in the world. We're called to help them because we have empathy for their actual needs. That's the kind of love that Jesus had for us. That's the kind of love that Jesus calls us to show for others. And most importantly, the kind of love that Jesus calls us to have is a kind of love that causes us to act to help others, even people we don't know, and even people who do not appreciate it. Jesus went to the cross to pay the price for everybody, even the people who crucified him. And being willing to pay the price and even sacrifice for the good of others is what God's kind of love is really all about. We hear a lot about thoughts and prayers, and every time there's a big tragedy or something, people say, well, we have thoughts and prayers. Sometimes all we can do is thoughts and prayers. But if we stop ourselves there and say, okay, I've done thoughts and prayers, and I'm not going to try to do even more, and actually take action to address the actual pain and needs in the world, then we're not doing love the way Jesus did love. Sometimes we are simply called to act, and act even and especially when there is a cost involved. So, that's why Joan was saying the last couple of days, come, be here, but also bring a checkbook. Because sometimes it's as simple as writing a check, and sometimes it's more complicated than that. But whatever it is that we're called to do individually or together, to act and actually make a difference in the world, that's the kind of love that Jesus calls us to. Honestly, pretending to have warm, fuzzy feelings about other people would be a lot easier and a lot less stressful. Yet Jesus' command is not to generate warm, fuzzy feelings or even to pretend to like other people. It's instead about living our lives in ways that reflect God's love in our interactions with others, even people we don't know, even people we may not like if we actually did get to know them. But it's by living the kind of love that Jesus lived that we show the world that we are his disciples. It's by living the kind of love that Jesus lived that we make God's love a tangible reality in the lives of other people. And it's by living the kind of love that Jesus lived that we too can live into the reality of the new life of Jesus' resurrection.